Alcides Moreno was still alive when firefighters reached the twisted scaffold. He was lying in an alley beside an Upper East Side apartment tower, surrounded by broken metal, blood, and pieces of the platform that had carried him down from the 47th floor. His body had hit the ground after a fall of almost 500 feet. His brother Edgar had fallen with him and died at the scene. The men who arrived expected to find two bodies. Instead, one of them was breathing. On the morning of December 7th, 2007, Alcides and Edgar Moreno had gone to work as window washers in Manhattan. They were brothers from Ecuador, doing a job that made most people afraid just to watch. Window washers stepped onto suspended platforms, trusted cables, anchors, motors, harnesses, and routine, then rose along glass walls while the city moved far below them. Alcides was 37 years old. Edgar was 30. They were experienced enough to know the work and the danger, but that morning began like another job. They reported to the Solo Tower, a tall apartment building on East 66th Street on the Upper East Side. The tower rose above the street with rows of windows stacked high into the sky. The brothers were supposed to wash them from a suspended scaffold. A scaffold like that was not meant to feel dramatic. It was meant to feel controlled. Workers used it every day across New York. A long metal platform hung from cables running down from the roof. The men could move it up and down the face of the building, stopping where they needed to clean. It was heavy, mechanical, and ordinary to the people who depended on it. Then it failed. The platform broke loose while the Moreno brothers were high on the building. There was no time to climb, no time to get inside, no time for someone on the roof or street to save them. The scaffold dropped. From that height, the ground did not rush up like it would from a ladder or a rooftop. It was a long fall, long enough for the body to understand what was happening and still be helpless against it. Edgar separated from the platform and fell toward the pavement. Alcides was believed to have stayed with part of the scaffold, clinging to it as it dropped beside the building. Doctors and investigators later could not say with certainty why Alcides survived. The best explanation was that the heavy aluminum platform changed the fall. Instead of falling alone, Alcides may have ridden down with the scaffold in a way that created air resistance and spread some of the impact. It may have slowed him just enough and taken part of the force when it struck below. But none of that made the fall survivable in any normal sense. When the scaffold hit the ground, it crumpled. Edgar was killed instantly. Alcides was left in the wreckage with injuries so severe that even getting him to the hospital was a fight to keep him alive. Emergency crews found him awake enough to show signs of life, but his body was shattered. He was taken to New York Presbyterian Hospital and Weill Cornell Medical Center, where surgeons and trauma doctors faced a patient who should not have made it through the doors. His legs were broken in multiple places. His right arm and wrist were broken. His ribs were fractured. His chest and abdomen were badly injured. His spine was damaged, including a shattered vertebra, but his spinal cord had somehow escaped the kind of injury that would have left him paralyzed. His brain was bleeding. His body was bleeding so badly that doctors had to replace his blood over and over. In the first 24 hours, he received 24 units of blood, about twice the blood volume of an adult human body. Doctors also gave him plasma, platelets, and medicine to help clotting. They placed a catheter into his brain to relieve pressure from swelling. They opened his abdomen to reduce pressure on his organs. His condition was so unstable that even moving him could have killed him, so one of the first procedures had to be done without taking him to an operating room. The hospital staff sedated him. They put him on a ventilator. They performed a tracheotomy so he could keep breathing. Every hour became a question of whether his body could survive the next crisis. His wife, Rosario, came to the hospital and stayed with him. She was not only waiting to see if her husband would live, she was also grieving Edgar, the brother who had fallen beside him and would never come home. Alcides did not need to be told that Edgar was gone. His wife later said he already knew. For days, Alcides could not speak. Tubes, sedation, pain, and injuries kept him silent. Rosario communicated with him by touch. She lifted his hand and guided it to her face and hair, trying to keep him connected to her, to the room, to life. The man in the bed had fallen farther than almost any person could fall and survive, but recovery did not look like a miracle from inside the hospital. It looked like machines, Blood, bandages, swelling, surgery, and waiting. Doctors kept finding things to repair. He underwent repeated abdominal operations. Orthopedic surgeons worked to piece together the broken parts of his body. By early January, doctors reported that he had already gone through 5 abdominal operations and 9 orthopedic procedures, with more surgery expected. Each operation carried risk. Each recovery brought another test. What stunned the hospital was not just that he lived through the fall, it was that he began to come back. His brain injuries were serious, but not as devastating as expected. He could move all his limbs. He began responding to commands. He was eventually able to breathe on his own. The doctors who treated him had seen high falls before, but almost never one like this. Falls from a few stories often killed. Falls from more than 10 stories almost always did. A 47-story fall was the kind of event that usually left no recovery to discuss. On Christmas Day, 18 days after the accident, Alcides spoke for the first time. Rosario had been touching his hand to her face, encouraging him, grounding him. Then Alcides reached out and touched the face of a nurse. Rosario heard about it and gently scolded him, telling him that he was supposed to touch only his wife. Alcides answered, "What did I do?" Those were his first words since the fall. For Rosario, it was more than a sentence. It meant he could speak. It meant his mind was present. It meant the man who had been carried in from a nearly impossible fall was still there. By early January of 2008, New York Presbyterian announced that Alcides was awake, talking, moving his limbs, and expected to walk again someday. Doctors called his recovery extraordinary. They were careful not to pretend they could fully explain it. Maybe the scaffold had slowed him. Maybe the way he landed spread the force. Maybe small differences in air, angle, metal, and impact added up in the only way that could keep him alive. But even after the first survival came the long survival. Alcides had to live with pain, surgeries, therapy, weakness, and the memory of falling with his brother. He had to learn what his changed body could do. Surviving the pavement did not erase the trauma. It only gave him the chance to carry it. Years later, he was walking. He had scars, limits, and a body that had been rebuilt through medicine and endurance, but he was alive in a way even his doctors had not expected when he arrived. His story became one of the most astonishing fall survivals ever recorded in New York, not because he walked away, but because he did not die where everyone thought he had to. The scaffold that failed killed Edgar Moreno. It took a brother, a son, a husband, and a worker who had stepped onto the platform expecting another day above the city. It nearly took Alcides too. But in the wreckage below the 47th floor, where broken metal lay across the ground and emergency crews prepared for the worst, one man was still breathing. His body had been crushed, opened, repaired, drained, filled again with blood, and held together by doctors who fought crisis after crisis. Alcides Moreno fell from the sky over Manhattan and survived. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.